Hi, welcome. My name is Jessica Rosenblum, and I'm the Director of Communications for J Street. And I'm really pleased to be here today in our virtual briefing, our Google Hangout, if you prefer, coming to you from the New Media Lab at J Street, hosting our friends from EcoPeace Middle East, Gidon Bromberg and Nader Al-Khatib. Gidon is the Israeli co-director of EcoPeace, and Nader is the Palestinian co-director of EcoPeace. EcoPeace is an incredible organization with whom we are very pleased to work closely. It's the only joint Israeli, Palestinian, and Jordanian organization promoting cooperative efforts to protect and share fairly the Middle East's shared environmental resources. The organization's unique innovation is the development of a shared regional vision for addressing the demise of the region's natural ecosystems, and especially water, which is what we're here to discuss today. Because water is an inherently transboundary issue, EcoPeace's twin aims of peace building and environmental protection are interdependent, mutually reinforcing, and of significant importance to J Street's own work. We're really pleased to have you gentlemen here today.
We're delighted to be here.
Excellent, excellent. I want to jump right in because I've got a host of questions right now, and we should have questions coming in online as well. I wanted to remind all of you watching online that you can send your questions to info@jstreet.org, or you can also tweet them at us, because this is in fact the New Media Lab. You can tweet them to @jstreet.org, and that's all spelled out, including the dot and the org, D-O-T-O-R-G. So send your questions along, and my trusty colleague Ben will be providing you the questions as they come in. But first, let's get started. You guys have come to Washington this week for what we here at J Street have loosely termed Water Week. You come bearing the message, water justice cannot wait. What does this mean?
So our water resources transcend the borders.
Mm-hmm.
It's really a misdemeanor or a misinformation to see Israeli, Palestinian, Jordanian communities from the context of their political borders only, when the natural bodies of water completely transcend those political borders. And what that means is that we're interdependent, whether we like it or not. When it comes to water issues, the borders are almost meaningless. Water requires that we work together. Yet the reality on the ground is that there currently is injustice. There currently is a system in place that was devised by the Oslo Accords 20 years ago. As a temporary measure that was only supposed to last 5 years, in the Article 40 Water Accord, that divided water basically 80-20. And 80% of the shared waters Israel has control of, and only 20% of the shared water Palestinians have control of. And that was seen, perhaps it was fine, in an interim 5-year perspective. But 20 years later, when the population has almost doubled, that divide makes no sense, prevents the type of economic development that we need to see, certainly in Palestine, throughout the West Bank and Gaza. But it also leads to a situation where the ecology is also lost, and Israelis also suffer a loss because there is insufficient treatment of sewage. So Palestinians are not getting enough water. Israelis and Palestinians are suffering from raw sewage not being treated and flowing through nature to streams that come to Israel. The West Bank is high country, Israel's low country. So the pollution flows into the middle of Tel Aviv, into the middle of Netanya, into the middle of Beersheba, into the middle of Haifa. The current situation is a lose-lose. And what we're all about is, by working together and by, we have a call that we can reach a new water agreement today that would promote water justice amongst people and also amongst nature. And therefore we should do that. We should move forward on that.
And I would say first, the 60 years of conflict in the Middle East and the unilateral actions when it comes to water, controlling water, did not help anybody. It just led to deterioration of our shared environment, the drying up of the Jordan River, the shrinkage of the Dead Sea with all the consequences. Then the failure of the Oslo arrangements also have led to poor sanitation, further pollution of shared resources, further suffering, and water remains a hostage of this conflict. While water is a basic human right, everybody entitled to a fair share and enough access to water, because that will affect his daily life, the hygiene level, all those things. And also the lack of progress in the peace process, should not deny the people access to a fair share of water. And water has been victimized by the politics. And we think water, there are several reasons why water should be relieved of the conflict, and the water should become as a bridge of confidence building rather than separation. And when people, there is enough disappointment with the whole peace process, but also if the thirsty people, and we are talking about tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. If we talk about Gaza alone, we talk about 1.8 million people who have no access or free access to potable water. This can create other kinds of instability in the Middle East. And I think we are fed up with the conflict, and it's time for the politicians to realize that we should put an end to this conflict, because that will open several doors for building bridges of peace and to invest the limited resources for the livelihood. We have lots of challenges that we can only tackle through cooperation, which requires ending the conflict and build peace in the region. And I think the unstable Middle East also today, not only in Israel, Palestine, there are lots of signals. Unless we move and in this conflict, we will be further victimized. And the last wars shows that there is no winner, everybody is a loser. Military is not a solution. We have to negotiate, and negotiate to reach a solution, not negotiate to a talk. So we are coming here to promote this message, because also we think the United States is the major player and probably the only decision maker when it comes to a real peace agreement in the Middle East. So the negligence or the lack of knowledge of what is happening on the ground, that is really a serious threat.
So that's an excellent segue, actually, Nader. Thank you. I want to talk about what message you brought to Capitol Hill. I know you had a number of meetings on Capitol Hill and briefed Hill staff on both sides, both chambers. What was the message? What are the projects that you're here to advocate for this week?
So one of the projects is the crisis of Gaza. The situation in Gaza is such that people, 1.8 million people, are no longer drinking healthy water. That was the situation before the last war, but it's got a lot worse since this last war. And we're not apologists here for Hamas or the like. We're here to solve an urgent issue of a water crisis that is potentially going to lead to a humanitarian crisis that will impact Palestinians and Israelis together. What's happened? Imagine Los Angeles drinking only from the water underneath the city. Well, 1.8 million Gazans. The Gaza Strip is 40 kilometers long, 10 kilometers wide. They're having to drink only from the water under their feet. And because of the large population, 70% refugees, they're extracting triple the renewable rate of that groundwater, of that aquifer. And therefore, saline water from the sea is just pouring in. The quality of 95% of the wells of Gaza are more similar to seawater than to fresh water.
And so they're no longer potable.
They're no longer potable. They're no longer drinkable water. And in addition, there is pollution from sewage. Gaza lacks tremendous investments in treating sewage. Again, large population, small area, the pollution is percolating into the groundwater. So it's not only saline water, it's unhealthy water. And our fear is that a pandemic, it's a ticking time bomb. A pandemic will break out in Gaza because the conditions are so bad. And they're worse post-conflict, post-Israel.
The war affected?
Because mostly because of the infrastructure has been damaged, but mostly because there's far less electricity now. Less electricity means that there is inappropriate or that there isn't constant chlorination of the water. That means that there's more chance for outbreak of disease. Sewage is not being pumped out. I mean, there's no sewage treatment plant. It's being pumped out to the sea, which also comes to Israel. But now there's not even enough electricity to pump it out to the sea, so it's percolating into the groundwater. This is a catastrophe in the waiting. And unlike Hamas bombs or rockets that Israel was able to respond to effectively through the dome will not protect Israelis from pandemic
sewage,
from pandemic disease, cholera, typhoid. It really is amazing that we haven't seen an outbreak of such pandemics in Gaza, like Ebola, will not just stop in Gaza, it will spread. And therefore, this issue is of urgent concern to anyone that cares for both Palestinians and Israelis.
So were your objectives on the Hill this week largely to educate members about the humanitarian crisis and the water crisis in Gaza? And what asks did you make of them on the Hill?
Well, first I think we are not here, for a project. We are here, to promote a message and to warn many decision makers that the ignorance of what is happening in reality on the ground is a threat for all of us in the Middle East. And that, we are all responsible to what is happening in Gaza, and we have responsibility to help the 1.8 million people. They are at least our brothers and sisters in humanity. And everybody has a moral responsibility, at least, to help those people to ensure sufficient access to healthy water. Also, to find ways to alleviate the current suffering and to push for a real final peace agreement. And we think water is solvable yesterday, before today, and before tomorrow. Water is being held hostage when it should not be. As said before, it's a basic human right, and water should be solved immediately. Everybody has an access, and including the ecology, because we live in one ecosystem, and the ecosystem requires water to survive, which will have a positive impact on everybody. As I said, there are lots of decision makers in the United States, and we need to unify efforts to change the sad reality and to communicate and make it clear that if we just continue blaming each other, by the time our politicians, if ever they will reach a final peace agreement, that land will not be suitable for any survival. So Gaza is a good example now.
So that really speaks to the specific ask that we put on the table. Under the Oslo Accords, Israel agreed to sell 5 million cubic meters of potable water to Gaza. For various reasons, initially Palestinian, later Israeli. That transfer never took place. Today, the pipelines connecting Israel to Gaza have been completed. And it's simply to turn on the lever and allow 5 million cubic meters to flow. There's no need for even an additional agreement. We're calling, in fact, that there's a possibility to double that, to have over 10 million cubic meters flow into Gaza. But even 5 million cubic meters that doesn't require any new agreement would tremendously improve the water reality on the ground. It could help avert a humanitarian crisis, a pandemic from breaking out. And that's what we were calling on the members of Congress and their staffers to ask the question to the Israeli embassy here in Washington, to ask the question of the State Department, what is their opinion? Can Israel, and you know, Israel is not solely responsible for the disaster of the water issues in Gaza, but Israel can be the solution that doesn't empower Hamas, that empowers the Palestinian Authority, President Abbas, and helps to protect the Israeli public from the concern of pandemics.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's the Nahal Oz pipeline that you're talking about that has been complete. For how long now?
It was completed earlier this year.
This year. You know, the problem, something that we agreed upon 20 years ago. So this is not something new. That was agreed upon, and it's not was not fulfilled. Israel was requested to fulfill what was agreed upon some 20 years ago when it comes to water for Gaza. That never happened. At the end, you know, it's because of the political, you know, differences. The absolute majority of the Gazans were victimized by this. And today, there is an approval to open it. It's just a valve. It takes seconds to open it. And then millions, you know, hundreds of thousands of people will enjoy a potable water for the first time in a long time. Even before the last war, the shores of Gaza were declared as risky areas for bathing, for swimming.
Closed beaches.
Beaches were closed because of sewage, lack of sanitation, lack of energy to run the infrastructure.
And that's our second ask. So you know, the World Bank, with European Union support, has completed to build a large sewage treatment plant in the north of Gaza. It stands there completed. It can treat a third of the sewage of Gaza that otherwise is polluting groundwater and flowing into the Mediterranean that pollutes the beaches of Israel too. It needs 3 megawatts of power. And unfortunately, you know, the only place where that power is available is Israel. The Gazan power plant was hit in the last war. I can blame Hamas for it, but it doesn't help.
Right.
You know, it doesn't solve the problem. You know, 3 kilowatts of energy can start treating that sewage and again go a long way towards preventing the outbreak of disease.
So what is the holdup here? We have a sewage plant, a new sewage plant that is essentially, you're saying, ready to go online. We have a pipeline that is ready to begin work, and it sounds as though it's simply a matter of turning the faucet. Why hasn't this happened?
So yeah, from our discussions from the Israeli office of EcoPeace, you know, we're understanding that it's the more military minds are in favor and understand that a humanitarian crisis is a ticking time bomb. It's more the politicians that, and perhaps you can understand it. I mean, I was running from Hamas rockets, you know, last month into a safe room in Tel Aviv every time the sirens ran off. So, you know, the Israeli public is responding from its stomach rather than from its head. And that's what politicians, instead of showing leadership, are following the fear of the street. So in the Israeli public, there's a sense of, why should we provide water, even if we sell water to Gaza, when Hamas was sending rockets at us just a month ago? And the reason is because we have a responsibility to do so, but we also have a responsibility to ourselves to do so. The situation is not going to disappear. 1.8 million Gazans will continue to live in Gaza. So, you know, being blind to the crisis and thinking that it's going to go away or we don't need to take action has been the response so far.
Some would argue.
Sorry to say something, you know, yani, there are lots of discussions, but the question here is not Hamas or non-Hamas. The sad reality first, Gaza, until today, and the West Bank, they are under occupation. And Israel is responsible for improving their lives. The Palestinian Authority is a shadow authority. It's not functional because it has no control to more than 80% of the West Bank. And even before Oslo, when Israel was totally responsible for Gaza, the water and sanitary problems were not solved. When the BA took responsibility for Gaza, for parts of Gaza after Oslo, there was a lake, on the north of Gaza near Beit Lahia, where more than 60,000 square meters were covered of sewage because there was no approval for a project there. 3 years ago, that big pool flooded a nearby village where people were drowned in sewage. Drowning in sewage. Okay, imagine kids, boys, girls drowning in sewage because there is no approval, for a project when the money is there. Now, the question of Hamas or not Hamas, we could disagree and we can discuss. The sad reality, Gaza has been under siege for 7 years, and the absolute majority are suffering. Goods are not moving easily. There is no energy. We are building, tension and the frustration, and the people have to respond. The people have no access to the whole world, and then they started either digging underground or trying to fly. You can, when you put people under such situation, those people will invent the impossible. So the biggest challenge, if we really want to come to sustainable solutions, we need to build peace in the whole region, a comprehensive justice peace. Then those challenges we are talking about become minor things, because the resources, just imagine how much was invested or wasted in the last war in Gaza. That money was allocated for the livelihood.
On both sides, on Hamas building tunnels and of course the weapons use.
So I want to get into a question. It was actually the first question that crossed our inbox, which was about how Hamas has built its power and built its constituency in Gaza by providing resources and social services to the people. And there's a question that's now been asked twice, actually. Would turning on the water or powering the new sewage plant, would that in fact empower Hamas?
I mean, I think that the results of this last hostilities, last war, show the failure of Hamas. There's been such destruction, and this rehabilitation effort is not moving forward. It's been a real lose. It's been a real loss, and empowers the PWA, the PA, and President
What is the
Abu
PWA?
Mazen, the Palestinian Water Authority.
Okay.
Because they are the partners through Ramallah and through their offices in Gaza that represent the Palestinian president, that manage water in Gaza, in fact, throughout the whole period. The Palestinian Authority and not Hamas have managed Gaza's waters for this whole period, so that provide message, work through President Abbas, and water flows through pipes. Work with or stay with Hamas keeps us thirsty. That's a very powerful message. People are trying to escape Gaza at the moment through tunnels, and we saw the horrific story of Gazans escaping through tunnels and getting on boats and drowning on their way to Europe. There's a desperate situation in Gaza, and the lack of potable water is part of that desperate situation. At the moment, things are somehow still managed, but when 1.8 million people get thirsty, no wall is going to hold them back either.
Right.
And God forbid should we see tens of thousands of Gazans move towards the Israeli border holding water canisters, appealing for drinking water. That vision could happen. We should stop. We have a common interest to stop that from happening.
And just as a point of information, the PWA, the Palestinian Water Authority, who makes that up? Who controls it?
Well, two things. In the last 6 years, we have seen 3 wars in Gaza. And a big lesson we can draw that there is no military solution. Every war makes both people suffering more and more, which is a lose-lose. Okay. There might be different political agendas, but this is not the discussion. We know at the end, the absolute majority of the people are the victims on both sides. People who want to live in peace and to think about the future and their kids and the future generations. About the water sector, the Palestinian Water Authority remains the main body responsible for the supply and managing the water in Gaza and in Palestine. The problem also, the Palestinian Water Authority is not free. The Palestinian Water Authority cannot move without any single project, without approval of the outcome of the Joint Water Committee, which is the outcome of the Oslo. And this Joint Water Committee, for the last 3 years, for example, did not meet, which means they did not approve any single water project or sanitary. That means sewage is flowing. Movement of goods. We talk about infrastructure in Gaza. We talk about wastewater, means we talk about energy. We talk about machinery. We talk about chemicals. Those things, are not moving easily. And even if you got all the equipments, the last technology, when there is no energy, it will not function. Even, if it functions, if there is no economy, those are services and they require cost for operation and maintenance. And unless you have a good economy where people can afford to pay, they can again collapse. And this all means when it comes to Gaza, sewage flowing to the Mediterranean or infiltrating, creating more crisis. The same in the West Bank. Sewage, we don't have natural rivers, a part of the Jordan River, which is also diminishing. We have rivers of sewage, and those are the outcomes of the politics. And everybody is suffering. And for how long we can continue, the environment will not wait. Okay, I say, okay, when you agree, okay, environmental degradation we are losing the limited resources when we have the potential to create enough water in the Middle East. If we think in a different way, we are blessed with the solar energy, with technology there, we can be the example of a real peaceful region. There are good examples to learn from other countries where the enemies today, they work together because they found they are better off if they work together. It's not a charity, it's not because they love each other, because it is a common interest and they see this is the only way.
Well, one last point I'd like to ask about is about the impact of the escalation this summer on water resources and the water crisis.
So with the energy, with the electricity of Gaza being hit, one of the outcomes is that chlorination could not properly take place. And given that the water is polluted, if you don't chlorinate it, then you're really creating increasing the possibility for outbreak of disease. And that's why our ask is so specific, clear and defined. If we want to avoid a pandemic outbreak in Gaza that will spread to Israel and Egypt like Ebola spread around West Africa, we need to get clean water in Gaza. And the most realistic means of getting clean water presently into Gaza is only through Israel. It's opening the Nahal Oz pipeline, allowing that water to be to flow and to be distributed, and it's to get 3 megawatts of power. It's a small amount of power to start that desalination plant that would start treating a third of Gaza's water that is currently just flowing, contaminating shared groundwater into the Mediterranean. Mediterranean waters that, in fact, both of us drink. So this is a common interest, a sensible measure that builds confidence between Israel and the Palestinian Authority, President Abbas.
Yeah, I think, what we've seen in terms of water, the only desalination plant which was supplying 2,600 cubic meters, the only plant in Gaza was destroyed. The only power plant which is supposed to supply water for electricity to run the infrastructure for water and sanitation was also destroyed, and the capacity is not enough even before the war. Also to mention that, the military machinery, whatever it is, this is not an environment friendly. So this is the biggest pollutant on earth. We don't know what was used during the fighting, what every side was using, but we know that is not environmentally friendly. We have polluted. I think the outcome of the war also in Gaza is pollution of soil, further pollution of unknown elements that will be reaching the groundwater, will be reaching the agricultural sector. It will reach the marine life in the Mediterranean, and it can affect everybody. So the military solution is not a solution. We need to think as a human beings to care of each other.
With common interests.
Sure.
Excellent. I'd like to turn now to some of the questions that have come in online. From Micah, we have the question, what obstacles stand in the way of building a desalination plant in Gaza so Gazans aren't dependent on Israeli water?
So, in order to build a desalination plant, and there is money. The World Bank has commitments from mostly the Arab world.
The Islamic Development Bank, yes.
To build a desalination plant. But desalination is energy intensive. Like there's no energy to power a sewage treatment plant, there's certainly no energy to desalinate. And why isn't there energy? Well, yes, the plant was impacted, but Gaza could be, in fact, energy self-sufficient. There are natural gas fields off the coast of Gaza that could be developed, and through their development, they could become a very important source of revenue for President Abbas, to not only make Palestine and Gaza energy independent, that would power desalination and provide water, but also a source of independent revenue that would reduce the dependence on US aid and European funding. And here too, we're active. We'll be holding a roundtable on December 1st on the need to move forward on exploiting for Palestine Gaza's natural gas reserves off the Mediterranean. And these issues of water and energy are not spoken about. They're not on the political agenda. They need to be, because they actually help us bring solutions to the table that improves people's livelihoods. And if we manage them in the right way, they also geopolitically strengthen the players that need to be strengthened, the moderates that want to reach the two-state solution that we so desperately need.
Yes, I think in a peaceful area, Gaza can tackle many of its current challenges. The natural gas, which was discovered before 2000, is a major revenue source that can dramatically improve the livelihood in Gaza and in the West Bank. But the questions, just because of politics, was not developed. Hamas was not in power when those things were discovered. There is also private sector involved, but because of politics, that was never concluded. Now, also, as my colleague mentioned, with desalination, the decision has been made by the Palestinian government and the Palestinian Water Authority to build a desalination plant that will supply Gaza with drinking water until 2035. The biggest challenge is not the money. The Islamic Development Bank allocated more than $250 million. The question is energy. The question is security. How we can be sure, if the conflict continues, that such structures will not be a target in any future conflict. So at the end, it's the missing piece in the Middle East, I think, is the biggest challenge for solving most of these problems.
We have a question from Bruce in New York City. He asks, there are global efforts to privatize water. We've seen major uprisings occur as a result. Is this happening at all in Israel? How does that relate to the Gaza crisis?
So it doesn't relate. There has been a little bit of privatization of water resources in Israel, more in the sanitation services, where the municipal services have been taken away by the municipality and a company. But for the most part, these have remained government companies, and there's been a lot of public dissent towards that, because it's led to an increase in the water price. But overall, Israel has excess water because of desalination, and Israel's leadership in treating and reusing its wastewater. Israel is a powerhouse of water today because of its technology, and therefore that provides the opportunity to share our natural water resources more fairly with Palestinians at a low political cost to Israel. So Israel's leadership in the water sector is actually creates the opportunity to move forward. You know, as Nada said earlier, water has been held hostage. The fact that we can't agree on Jerusalem should not stop us from agreeing on sharing our water resources more fairly. It's not ignoring Jerusalem. We should also move forward. It's not cutting. It's not saying that the issues aren't connected. They are. But if we can agree on one of these issues, the water issue today, then let's do that as a means to create the momentum to move forward on the other 4 final status issues.
Bernard Rith is asking, why hasn't the pipeline been turned on? I think you've addressed this, but has Israel made an official comment on why they refused to turn on the water for Nahal Oz?
So we have written to the Minister of Water, Silvan Shalom, and we have not received a response. And therefore, writing to the Israeli ambassador, to the Israeli embassy here in Washington or from anywhere in the United States, I think would be very helpful. It's in Israel's interest, as much as it's in Palestine's interest, to have that fresh water flowing. It not only helps to deal with the humanitarian crisis, it empowers the right people in the broader geopolitical context of the Israeli government and the Palestinian government as a strong message that we can turn things. When we work together, we bring water, and water is life.
We need to get out of this collective punishment. If we do not disagree, or if we are against certain groups, we should not use collective punishment to everybody, which would just create more anti-cooperation or anti-peace supporters.
And in terms of your message on Capitol Hill this week, what is it that you asked members of Congress to do, or any meetings you had with the administration? What can American electeds do? Can they do? Are they in an effective position to make an appeal to the Israelis? And is the resolution of this issue largely in Israel's hands, in the Israeli government's hands now?
Well, the agreement of supplying 5 million cubic meters was agreed to 20 years ago.
Right.
So Israel committed. What we understand, even before the war, the reason why Nahal Oz pipeline was not open was because Israel was wanting Palestinians to agree to water infrastructure projects for settlements in the West Bank. And the Palestinian Water Authority was refusing, and therefore water was being used as a tool. Today, as post hostilities, there's a broader sort of public image of after the rockets are coming on Israel, why would Israel supply water or sell water to Gaza? So we need to explain. Politicians need to move above the rhetoric and explain to the public that it's Israel's commitment and it's in Israel's interest to supply water to a population that needs that fresh water. Otherwise, the alternative will come and hit us like a train in our face.
So J Street sent to its own constituents, its activists, both on Monday and again today, a request that they take action, that they contact their members of Congress and ask their members of Congress to, in turn, call the Israeli ambassador, Ron Dermer, and to ask him for a response to why Israel has not yet turned on the pipeline and when it will. If people who are listening or participating online would like to take that action, you can go to J Street's website. It's jstreet.org, and it's on our homepage. You'll see the action readily apparent. We really encourage you to do that.
And we're grateful for that. We support that effort. We think that that message will come home, because that message makes sense to Israel's broader interest.
And I know you guys have another meeting after this, but I wanted to ask you one last question. In our meeting that we had earlier this week, I believe you were both discussing water as a metaphor for the conflict and for the larger region. I found it fascinating. And
so you know, the beauty of water is that it places in the same boat. You know, water carries us both. We drink from the same bathtub. What Nada does on his side of the water resources impact me, and what I do on my side of the water resources impacts Nada. If we don't know how to work together to manage those shared water resources, we both lose. That's what's been happening for the last 60 years of the conflict. We're all about turning that around. And when we work together, and that's the beauty of water, that's the positive side of the metaphor. And when we work together, we create more water. We create an environment that you know, provides abundance, provides jobs, provides opportunities, provides livelihoods, and of course that's what is a cornerstone to a sustainable peace. So you know, not dealing with our water resources on the one hand leads to a crisis, and that's where we are. Working together over water resources creates trust, creates new opportunities that can help us move out of not only the water crisis, but the broader political crisis that unfortunately our leaders haven't so far taken that courageous step, but is absolutely required.
Well, we know water is life, and there can be no life without water. I think for us, you know, we can see the potential opportunities that will make everybody better off if we change the way of thinking and mentality, if we unify the efforts, if we work as equals, if we try to build, you know, bridges for peace, bridges for, you know, thinking about the other. We should not remain selfish and ignoring the neighbors. There are neighbors, you know, who need those resources and, you know, should learn from the others. Nobody could expect that Germany, you know, will be supporting the other European countries, you know, to get out of the financial crisis. We would like also to see, you know, a good example from Israel to be a donor, you know, to help, you know, the Palestinian, the Jordanian, the other poor Middle East countries to build their economy and, you know, to work together towards peace. And definitely, on top of all the requests, we all dream to, by the time we go back to our home, you know, it will be a different, you know, era where peace, where we can travel from one country to another without walls, with no checkpoints. The way we've been traveling together, we've been touring the whole world, you know, delivering that message of peace. It's not impossible. It's doable. It just requires the courage, leadership to make those decisions that we've been waiting for more than 20 years. And let us pray together and share efforts to change that reality and make the Middle East really an example of peace, of good life, of, you know, a source to help solving, you know, other conflicts in other parts of the world.
And water can help us get there. We can move forward first on water, and with the trust built over shared water, our experience is that the sky's the limit.
Excellent. Well, what an excellent note to end on. I want, for anyone who's looking for more information about EcoPeace Middle East, that is FOEME.org. And again, for anyone looking to take action with J Street and carrying this message forward to your own electeds and asking them to contact the ambassador about turning on the Nachalos pipeline, go to jstreet.org. I want to thank both of you gentlemen, Nader and Gidon, so much for being here with us today. It's been a real pleasure. And
A pleasure is completely
Our
ours.
pleasure.
thank you. And thank
very,
you
very
to
much.
all those who participated online and for sending in the questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Where is the mouse?